Hi everybody, I'm Scott Allen Miller and this is Sam IT, and today we're going to look at the myths around Active Directory because somehow there's a lot of them. Active Directory is a really interesting, very powerful directory services product that Microsoft brought out starting with Windows 2000 in 2000. So it's been around for about 17 years at this point. It's just about to have another birthday. It's a very good product with a lot to offer, but it's important to understand what it is. Active Directory is just complex enough that it tips over that breaking point, and the average shop is pretty confused about it, and this creates a lot of problems. One, it causes Active Directory to be deployed in a lot of places where it's not beneficial, and two, it's often kept or used in inappropriate ways because it's not well understood and it's thought that it's needed for things it is not. I'm going to talk about a few of those common myths today so we can kind of tackle what AD really is. So first of all, what is it? It's a directory service. Basically, it's a hosted database that is really efficient at looking up simple things very quickly in a tree. It's not a relational database. It's a specific kind of database that's really useful for this. And what Active Directory is built on is LDAP, the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and Kerberos, which is an authentication and security scheme for keeping that data communication secure. Those two things together, along with some special schemas that Microsoft has put together and a few extra little bells and whistles, makes Active Directory. And one of the coolest pieces is one that's most misunderstood, and that's that Microsoft provides a built-in application layer database clustering mechanism so that it's relatively easy to have multiple Active Directory servers tied together and sync between themselves, and it doesn't take a lot of interaction on your part as the IT administrator who's dealing with those things, right? So a system admin that works with Active Directory often doesn't need to even understand that it's a clustered database. It just works because Microsoft takes care of all that under the hood. That stuff's great about Active Directory, but it also leads to tons and tons of misinformation about it because people start thinking about it as a special case because it may be the only clustered database that they work with, and they start thinking that the rules around it come from the fact that it's AD rather than the fact that they have a clustered database, and often then get information wrong about standalone AD units because so much of their information is focused on this clustering mechanism, which then doesn't exist if you only have a standalone system. So there become all this misinformation or misunderstandings, and a lot would just, if you just knew what it was, suddenly all those things become very clear. Beyond that, people often assume that AD is doing tons of things that it is not. It is looking up information about people. Basically, you can look up people and things. You can look up a user, for example, and discover what group they're a part of. You can find out basic information about them because AD does a great job of storing information about people, such as a location or phone number or information like that. You can make notes in there. You can extend the schema and store your own data about people in there, like an employee ID. Very easy to put into Active Directory. Active Directory then also stores the password for users in most cases, and one of the bells and whistles that Microsoft has built on top of Active Directory is the ability to query securely the AD system to see if a password as given to a remote client matches the one on the AD system without actually passing the password in clear text across the wire. Lots of other things do this as well, but Active Directory was a major push in this field and is famous for having done a really good job with this. However, because it does a good job with looking up passwords, people begin to assume it does a lot of other things that they see associated with passwords, and this is where Active Directory becomes exceptionally confusing. One of those things is SMB security, the server message block protocol used for things like mapped drives. Some people refer to this as CIFS, the Common Internet File System. CIFS specifically refers to one older version of SMB that nobody uses anymore, but the name still lingers around. Technically, it's always SMB today. With SMB, we have this robust network file transfer protocol that can very easily talk to AD or other things, and the security mechanisms of SMB are part of the SMB server and protocol itself. There's no security coming from Active Directory other than the ability to look up what people or computers are grouped with, within what groups they're members of, and to check if the password is accurate or not, or if they've authenticated. We're just looking up basic information. The actual security as to what people are allowed to access is not held by Active Directory, but is held by the SMB server. Likewise, if we're dealing with files on our local disk, that mechanism for security is part of the NTFS file system standard and part of the driver that's used on the client to access those files. Again, it's going to look up who the users are and if they're authenticated through AD, but again, it's just a simple lookup. All of the actual security, the mechanisms that actually prevent someone from accessing those files, the mechanisms for listing the ACLs, those are all part of NTFS, not Active Directory. Active Directory does not hold NTFS security permissions. The list of what files people can and can't access does not exist in AD anywhere. AD doesn't even know what files exist, so there's no way that it could then apply permissions to them because it doesn't have that kind of information within it. That stuff is stored on the file system. And the file system, again, is actually a type of database itself. But so Active Directory is often assumed to be carrying lots and lots of information that it is not. In fact, it generally carries a very tiny amount of information. It's just information that is very universally useful that all kinds of other systems want to work with, such as looking up the name of a user, looking up a list of computers, seeing what groups they're members of, and seeing if they've authenticated and if the person that they're talking to is really the person that they think that they have. Once we understand the myths around AD and how simple AD itself is, it becomes much more apparent how much we can do without it. Because I see a lot of people who are concerned that they want to have map drives with SMB and they don't want to give up their security. But it's not AD providing the security. It may make it easier. AD is a great tool, but it itself does not provide security. Same thing with NTFS. People will say they want to have a file system security and they can't just have everyone accessing the same files without authentication. And of course, that is not AD that does any of that. That is NTFS. If you just have a single workstation and you share it between several users, you have no servers whatsoever, no Active Directory whatsoever, you still get all that security. It may be more cumbersome and more work for you to manage it, but it's all there. You're not losing the actual security. Another huge myth is that AD provides group policy, the relatively simplistic and often troubled attempt at a state-like management system that Microsoft has used in the past. They have some new technology that's replacing this, but that's a topic for another discussion. But group policy is often associated with Active Directory, partially because in some circumstances, Microsoft has played the trick of making the name group policy associated with the license of Active Directory and calling the same function something slightly different when Active Directory isn't present, but it doesn't change the fact that the technology and capabilities exist regardless. Group policy is not part of Active Directory. It is managed by, it can exist without Active Directory, it can exist without any directory service whatsoever. It can be used with other directory services. Group policy is a standalone tool that can exist even without a server infrastructure. It can be automated through scripts, it can be done locally, manually, it can do a lot of different things. It is simply a disconnected mechanism that, again, does work well with Active Directory, but that's not the same as not being available without it. I hope that this video was useful to you. I know that the myths around anything are always complex and always lead to lots of questions, and you probably wonder if there's a myth you've heard that I didn't mention, and you want to know if it's really a myth or not. Please put that in the comments below. I would be very interested to hear what other things people assume come from Active Directory, and we'll discover if they do or do not. Remember to like, subscribe, join our community here on Sam IT, and if you want to support us, we would appreciate it greatly. You can go to Patreon, join there, and you can subscribe by giving like $1 per video that we do, and it simply charges you once a month, and your regular contributions can go an extremely long way to helping support this network and this educational effort that we're making. Discover how easy and affordable business telephone service can be. Say it with Talkadillo.